Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Braaten. Today we have back with us Dave Petersen. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We are looking at the Gospel reading, which can be for either the second Sunday after Christmas or a portion of it for the Vigil of Epiphany. I will read the full reading for the second Sunday after Christmas. It comes from Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 to 23. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead." And he rose and took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene. All right, so in terms of the context of Matthew, we know this is at the beginning. It's after the birth. But in terms of looking at this as the second Sunday after Christmas or the Vigil of Epiphany, the Vigil of Epiphany, the reading starts in verse 19 and goes to the end. So you don't get any of the murdering or discussion of the wise men there in the beginning. So what's the character of each one here in terms of its liturgical character or where it falls in the church year?
Well, the Vigil of Epiphany would only be when this falls on January 5th. So okay. It's a little less common, right, that it would be observed on a Sunday at least. I think the way that it kind of plays out is that Christmas too is very much a repeat of Holy Innocents. It's hard to have the murder of those babies described and not have that be the major emphasis, I think. Yeah. So by waiting, by jumping to 19 and reading about the return from Egypt as a way, both in either case, right? Chronologically, this happens after the visit of the Magi. It's the Magi that, their misdirection by the star to Jerusalem rather than to Bethlehem that alerts Herod and, creates this. But, and then of course, so here's kind of fun. I was thinking about how Caesar Augustus gets them to Bethlehem, right? I mean, Joseph and Mary don't want to go to Bethlehem, but they're kind of forced by the emperor, and then he dies. And then, they're comfortable in Bethlehem and they're going to stay there. And then Herod's rage drives them to Egypt where they don't want to go, right? Yeah. And then he dies, and then they're coming back to Bethlehem, and Archelaus is on the throne, and so they can't go there, and it forces them to Nazareth. And then he dies, and then finally, then Herod Antipas is the Herod, of that talks to Pilate and so forth. So there is this driving of history, this God working through the kings who have they're operating out of malice, but they're actually getting the Messiah to the right place, so that he's born in Bethlehem, he's called out of Egypt, and yet he's from Nazareth. So anyway, the emphasis, I think between Christmas 2 and the Vigil of Easter is that the Vigil of Easter kind of forces you to think about Nazareth and the fact that Jesus is the Nazarene. If you start in verse 13, you could still do that, obviously. You could make that choice, but it's kind of a hard choice to make, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think I will probably observe Christmas too, just because you get the whole reading. And I realize you could expand that, but well, let's dive into the reading. What's all this Joseph stuff? It's like a new Joseph, a dreamer who, ends up into Egypt, only not because of famine, but he's in Egypt because of the rejection of his brothers. So you have that, right? Herod, who is rejecting Jesus, and then obviously the parents, and so they have to flee there. What are the other parallels, and what is what's different and about this recording of this Joseph as opposed to the Joseph from Genesis?
Well, it's not Joseph, but there is the sort of irony that they go to Egypt where the midwives were told to kill the babies to escape Herod killing the babies, right? So you've got the Moses, the Moses thing there, and yet of the place that you would seek safety is Egypt is surprising.
Well, it's like even Joseph. The Egyptians recognize that. Even the Egyptian midwives recognize that you shouldn't be doing this.
And the wise men lie. They deceive Herod much in the way that the midwives deceived Pharaoh. So those are the other two kings. The other two kings I didn't name are Pharaoh and Ahaz, right? So because you've got Caesar, Herod the Great, and Archelaus, but then it seems like in the background you've got Pharaoh. And I think also you've got Ahaz, because the virgin birth is a sign against him. But so there's a lot of kings, and then Jesus being the true king, but, hidden and so forth. So, in terms of Joseph, what are the parallels? They're both righteous men. Joseph, the dreamer, we sometimes, I think, misjudge Joseph, the patriarch, because it seems as though he's putting on airs, but he's actually just telling the truth. That's what is revealed to him, even though it makes other people uncomfortable. And so, Joseph in Moses is actually portrayed as righteous. He flees from Potiphar's wife. He's pure. And this Joseph, of course, earlier in Matthew's gospel was because he was a just man, a righteous man, Matthew says, was going to put away Mary secretly. And it's sort of romantic sounding and psychologizing perhaps, but I really think that passage is about Joseph's love for Mary, right? I think he wanted to marry Mary because he loved her. And when he finds out that she's pregnant and wrongly assumes, as anyone would, that she's become pregnant by a man, he thinks that she loves somebody else. And he doesn't want her to be destroyed and publicly shamed. So there's great compassion in, his righteousness. So that I don't like the translation there of just, because in English, to me, just rings of justice and doing what's according to the law. Whereas here it seems like it's righteousness. He's doing what's right, what's good. And it's the same word, I know, but anyway. Well, and that's, I think, the correspondence.
It used to mean the same thing, essentially. Right. But it does take on a different, at least we hear it differently.
Yeah. So that's a heavy correspondence between the two of them. And then I think, that certainly, I mean, every time Joseph only talks to angels in dreams. So, the angel comes directly to Mary and to Zechariah, but in Joseph, it's always through. And there's three dreams. There's the dream that the Holy Spirit actually caused this child and he should marry her. And then there's the dream warning. Wait a minute. Does he get it? Are there four dreams? Does he get a dream that warns him that Herod's trying to kill the baby?
Yeah.
Or does he just get a? Where's that at?
Verse 13. The angel of the Lord appeared to. So his.
Okay,
so his
that's his
adopted
second
son.
one. Yeah.
No, it says an angel of the Lord. An angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child." And then the third dream is
Herod's dead. Go back.
Yeah, so they go back, and then
a fourth.
a fourth to go to Galilee.
Okay, but, 4, not 3.
The question here is: it's unclear whether or not it's revealed to him to go to Galilee, or just not to go where Archelaus is.
Oh, I think it's. Let's see. What's it say? He's to turn aside into the region of Galilee, is what it says. Okay. So not Bethlehem, not Judah, not where Archelaus is governor, but I mean also directed to the region, and I think probably to the very city, but maybe not. Maybe Joseph chooses it, but seems as though this has all been pretty precise up to this point. They're not leaving it to chance that Joseph might choose the wrong city.
Okay, so you could do quite a bit with those themes, right? The new Joseph.
Oh yeah. Well, I think. Here's something else I thought was really I never considered before, but Herod finds out that they've been warned, right? Somehow. How does he know that? How's that go? Herod. Oh, he knows he's been deceived by the wise men. So he sends this trap, kill all the babies. We'll make sure we don't need them to tell us which one. We know where. There aren't that many babies in Bethlehem. Just kill all the boy ones. But then somehow, so they escape. Somehow Herod must know they escape because they continue to seek him. Right? Because it says in verse 20, "Arise, take the young child and his mother and go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the young child's life are dead." So these are like the Nazgul searching for Jesus. They killed the baby boys, but they know they missed him because why? Why didn't they just if Joseph is warned, he could have just hidden, overnight. And then when they're done killing the babies, come out. Or even just, move to a neighboring city.
Yeah.
Why go all the way to Egypt? Because nowhere in Judah was safe. And I think it sounds to me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's kind of like it's reminiscent of Athaliah and, what's the young boy's name that Zechariah hides away, who's actually rightfully king?
I don't know.
It's not, is it Jeconiah or?
Maybe. But yeah, but he has to go all the way to Egypt and has to stay there for an extended period. It's probably not that long because Herod the Great dies pretty quick after this. Mm-hmm. But that is amazing how quickly. I mean, Caesar Augustus dies pretty quick after this. Herod dies pretty quick after this, and then Archelaus also. I think there's something going on there. I think the kings of the earth, right? The kings of the earth plot. How's that go in Psalm 2? The kings of the earth set themselves up. That's what it is. But the Lord has them in derision. Anyway, this seeking thing, I think, was more active because, and somehow Herod knows. I mean, he has really gone insane. So Edersheim, in his Life and Times of the Messiah, has a whole section on Jesus in Nazareth. And he talks a lot about Herod the Great and then Archelaus and Antipater, who Herod has killed just before he dies, and then Antipas, and how all the people that, I mean, this was this killing of the babies in Bethlehem was completely in character with Herod the Great. It's not recorded in anywhere other than the Bible. I mean, but we do have recordings from Josephus and others about the people that Herod killed. In fact, he was sick, and he had like 3,000 prominent people imprisoned in the Hippodrome to be killed when he died, so that Judah would be sad when he died. Isn't that great? Because he knew they'd be happy when he died. He doesn't want them to be happy. So he's like, I'm going to kill all these people so that everybody here is sad. But they didn't do it. But that's the kind of person he was. You know, he really was a tyrant of the worst sort. So the fact that he would do this is totally in character. So that section from Edersheim's worth reading. I mean, it only takes 5 minutes, but
So the king's name is Jehoash. It's from 2 Kings 8, where Athaliah is actually a relation of Ahaz and Jezebel, but she marries Jehoram of Judah, and then becomes like the regnant queen, because she goes after all of the actual descendants of David to kill them, but Jehoash gets hidden away by Zechariah, and I think it's Zechariah and some other people. And then when he becomes of age, they bring him out and they kill her, and he reigns.
There you go. I think you meant Ahab, by the way, but
did I say Ahaz?
I think you said Ahaz, probably because I'd said it earlier. But
yeah,
because didn't you say?
Jezebel and Ahab.
Jezebel. I couldn't remember what the wife of Ahab was, but yeah, good. Well, there you go. It is like that. Yeah. So why can't he just hide? He can't, because they're actively seeking him, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not, but I mean, it does seem like it does seem like going all the way to Egypt is overkill. Sorry for the pun, but again, why couldn't? It's expensive. It's a pagan country. Why couldn't he have just gone to Nazareth? Or, back to where he was from, or anywhere, just for, a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I mean, there are, in Deuteronomy, there are like commands or issues from the Lord through Moses on how to view the nations and how to relate with the nations. And Israel is always supposed to have some kind of recognition that in Egypt they sojourned. And despite the lunacy of the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus, they were welcomed there and fed and kept alive. And so because of that history, they're meant to look upon that nation with a different light, despite that one instance.
Okay.
Whereas like the Moabites and some others who,
right.
or the, Edomites, they're blood relation. And so they have a different standing in terms of how they should interact with them.
Okay.
So maybe it was just that, or maybe this is, look, we're really building the third temple. We're really building, the new Israel, and Jesus is that in his own flesh.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, for sure, Yeah, I mean, Jesus is the true Israel, and he's going through all the things that Israel goes through. I mean, of course, that way. I just meant kind of from this idea that they're seeking him. And I think that, my sense is that, Joseph and Mary having to be sort of corralled or shepherded to the right place. That, they're driven to Bethlehem, they're driven to Egypt, and then they leave Egypt, and then they're driven to Nazareth. And, it's not like they're just, this isn't like, Joseph, got a job offer in Egypt, so he went to Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Well, ancient Palestine went down to those borders of Egypt, didn't it?
During Solomon's reign, you mean? I don't think it didn't go quite that far, I didn't think. But, I mean, to be sure, Egypt's I mean, Egypt's like going to Chicago, or where, it's a major, it's this major hub and metropolitan thing where there would be work, where there would be a Jewish community, where there would be, but it wouldn't, Herod wouldn't be able to get them. So, I mean, I get it. It makes sense in all those kinds of ways. And it certainly makes sense that it's the fulfillment of the Hosea passage and that Jesus is the true Israel. So,
well, I guess I'm saying is it has to be outside of his jurisdiction, Herod's jurisdiction.
Yes, that's right. That's right. But so then also needs to be someplace
he may have been able to hide in, like the backwaters of still Israel, but that still would have maybe been under Herod's jurisdiction.
Right. But I mean, my point was just like, why does he have to keep on hiding? If Herod already thought he got him, how does Herod know he didn't kill him in Bethlehem?
Well, he doesn't know. That's the thing. He thinks he may have.
Then he's not. All right.
I mean, this is like, this is like the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees after they put Jesus to death, right? We got to put guards and we got to seal the tomb. Like at the very moment that they should be, all right, we finally did it. They're still scheming and plotting because that's just how the devil is.
Because they're driven by fear. Right. And Herod is, I mean, not just this incident, but right, as recorded, Herod's trying to protect his throne at any cost. He's absolutely desperate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I read Stecker and Walther, Walther's second sermon, or somebody's second sermon. I think it was Walther has two of them. And that was an interesting comparison. So Stecker he takes this to sort of preach about the sufferings of the Christian and that sufferings are inevitable, and so this is a terrible story. And yet at the same time, we see God's hand in it, that God guides us and he eventually lifts our burdens. So that's really the thesis of Steckart. And Walther was interesting that Herod is really an example of the foolishness of unbelief. And because he says Herod refuses to follow Jesus because he's afraid of what he will lose. But those who follow Christ lose nothing. And so whereas Steckart sort of says, just embrace the suck and believe that God loves you and it will all work out. Just good advice. But Walther, in a similar way, he says, don't reject Christ for the fear of crosses. And that would be foolish. So I thought they're very closely related themes, I think, not identical, but they both kind of came to they responded in a very similar way to this text in their theses.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I like both of them, how you describe both of them. And it's interesting because I think mostly we would preach this from the perspective of this is Jesus fulfilling all the words and will of God, that this is, the beginning of his passion, not like his actual passion, but his obedience, right? His passive obedience. And, that he suffers these things at the hand of evil men. I think that's typically how I've heard this preached. I think that's typically how I've done it. But what's interesting is every time this text comes up, when we have Bible class afterward, I get the questions of why did God allow this? And they take that on head on. Those two sermons, Walther and Steckart.
Yeah. And they take it on head on and they make immediate application to the modern hearer.
Yeah.
I think there's probably, they're long sermons, by our standards. So I don't want to, but in terms of the number of words, they probably don't talk as much about Christology in their sermon, in these particular sermons, as we're accustomed to. I think you're right. It's much more kind of very quickly applied.
Yeah. This is the comfort in this, and this is what we should learn from this and how God works. and not be surprised by fiery trials, but rejoice that we are being counted. I think that's the epistle for the day, that we are, counted worthy of suffering along with Christ, participating in those.
Yeah. Yep. There's definitely a kind of elevating or ennobling of the Christian's sorrows. And I mean, it seems almost arrogant to say that, your suffering is like that of, the women in Bethlehem, or of Mary and Joseph. But that's really what they both do.
Yeah.
So
I love Steckhart's opening, because he's kind of like, this is the first Sunday in the new year. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what new things are going to trouble this or trouble that. But what I do know is that the Christian is going to suffer. We're going to have crosses. That was like so classic. Like, we don't know this and we don't know that, but I do know this. Yeah.
I mean, I think some of the sort of things that the way that this could be brought in, it's more of a modern concern in a sense, but the kind of injustices that we're suffering. I mean, this is really unjust that Mary and Joseph would be driven away by Herod, but also, unjust for, again, the people of Bethlehem, that their association with Jesus causes this tragedy to fall upon them. So, how do we respond when, and I mean, that's the sort of problem of evil, why do bad things happen? And so, I mean, I think that's a tie. Obviously, the abortion stuff is a tie as well, that, why are they killing these babies? Why does Herod kill these babies? Why did Pharaoh try to kill the babies? Why are we killing babies? I think we have the least of the three of them. Ours is the worst reason, because, Herod and Pharaoh was afraid of the people, and Herod's afraid of someone else taking his throne. We just want pleasure, and it's really gross that we would kill a baby for the sake of 10 minutes of pleasure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could tie it more closely to Herod and everything. We recognize that when we have children, we lose some of our self-determination and power, that it must be pushed in and pressed into service and duty to the other. And Herod's unwilling to do that.
Yeah, but I would just say, fine, don't have children. I mean, that's not so fine, but I mean, you're going to murder a baby? It just is unthinkable.
Yeah.
But I know. No, you're right. There, of course. I think the other thing as I was sort of, jotting down notes and thinking about this is, I wonder too if this is really to really make, which I think it is, this demonic, nefarious, legislation, if it isn't some of these people in power a way of keeping the people weak. And the way we keep them weak is just, let's look, if the midwives kill the babies, then, the people they won't rise up, they won't get bigger. But also in our case, right, if we can be taught to indulge our flesh and to have no self-discipline and no strength of character, right? Not only do we not have, who knows what children are being murdered, the great leaders, the great scientists, the great theologians, the great novelists that we're killing before they even can come out of the womb. But also, it's also destroying us, destroying our own souls, so that we're
definitely
subject to
I've
them.
said
So,
from the pulpit a number of times, why are we surprised when a school gets shot up? Why are we surprised when people want to cut off body parts? We've been teaching them since 1972 that the way to fix our problems is to murder it.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's terrible, but
Heartbreaking. And it has,
that's heartbreaking.
It has totally shriveled our souls, so that is our first response towards the things that we consider to be a problem, or that and by problem, things that make us feel sad, or things that make us have to do our duties. I mean, I think Adam should have crushed the head of the serpent, right? I think that was his duty.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, that's a very different, response to of violence than what we're dealing with here.
Right. Right. Well, for a long time I thought the worst term I'd ever heard was this term baby daddy. That's just awful. This idea that the person that impregnated you, it's just gross. It's so horrible. And like, this is a thing. But lately I found a new term that I think is maybe even worse is this incels. Have you heard of this? It stands for
involuntary celibate.
Really involuntary. Yeah. And these are people who are angry because these aren't people that want to get married, that want to find fulfillment. These are just people that want to have intercourse, and they're blaming women for not, just doing this. And I mean, I don't blame the women for not. That's what the women are supposed. The women aren't supposed to have sex with you. Right? Mm-hmm. You're supposed to marry them, and then your wife will have sex with you. And this idea that this is, and I mean, that's not the whole point of the whole thing anyway.
No.
This idea, again, it's like it's defining yourself according to your lusts. Mm-hmm. And, just the basest kind of thing. It's in a similar thing, a third term. I was just talking to the kids, the high schoolers about this. This use of the word virgin as an insult, because to be a virgin, right, as a teenager is to be, the way that it's used, is to be unsophisticated, right, lacking in, right, all this kind of stuff, and somehow insufficient and not grown up, not mature, all that kind of stuff. And that is so opposite. And I just wonder if that, again, a kind of demonic twist of the thing where where I'm accustomed to running into the word virgin is in the creed, right? Yeah. Born of the Virgin. And this is a title of honor that, right, that she, took this on, and now they're making it into an insult, and where kind of sophisticated people are the people who have no self-discipline, no self-control, but who simply live for pleasure. Mm-hmm. And that's gross. That's not something to be admired, right? Again, defining yourself according to lust rather than...
Also defining yourself contrary to what is held up in Scripture. Like, I mean, this is still all what it's about. They are denigrating the Virgin Mary in doing this. When they make fun of you because you're suffering, they're denigrating the cross. When they... Yeah. And so all of these things are meant as a subtle or not so subtle, or at least maybe they can claim that they're not, making religious slurs, but it's a religious slur.
It is.
To bring these things to bear against Christians, specifically, in order to make them feel like they're not really human. Right. That they're not worthy of whatever, the laws or what, the laws of nature would accord them. And so we can treat them with disdain. And so, we come up with terms, and that's how the devil doesn't have his own stories. He has to copy. And so he takes things and twists them. So, yeah. That's what he's doing with a lot of these terms, and we've bought it.
Oh, I know.
And that's the big problem is that where are the watchers during this time? Are we calling it out? Are we doing due diligence to say, watch out for these things? I mean, I don't want to be caught up in all of the fads of culture, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you can't avoid it because this is what you have to preach against.
Yeah. Well, another thing to preach against is vengeance. That, you've got, again, the kind of willingness of Herod to engage in violence and his self-justification, that it's so easy to give in to wrath, and how self-righteous Herod is, right? When he saw that he was deceived, he was filled with wrath. So, and then he strikes out. And I think, this is for us the easiest emotion. Like I always say, in my, the 5 love language thing, you're supposed to be, according to Chapman, you got to go back to how you were raised. And I think there's a 6th one, you have the 5 love languages. The 6th one in our house, we showed affection by not showing affection. So it was, there was no saying I love you or hugging, right? Both of those, because we were people who are easily embarrassed. And so, there is this, but the emotion that is easy and was sort of always sort of allowable wrongly is anger. Because anger feels strong and feels masculine, or you know what I mean? And so there's just, it's so, even people that, don't, they're sort of stoic until it comes to anger. And somehow that one just seems like it can rule them all. So I think that's, you see this with road rage. You see this with the kind of disdain that we are prone to hold other people, everybody's stupid except me. There's no common sense except mine, my experience. I'm the only one that knows whatever. I'm wise enough to know what the coach should have done, even though, he gets paid all this, just all that kind of arrogance and anger. That's the spirit of vengeance. Yeah. And it's very easy to fall into.
Right. I mean, that's
wrath.
And we would want to distinguish it between just anger in general, right? And letting that emotion rule over you or get in the driver's seat, so to speak. We would never say that, lust is okay, depending on who you're lusting for. That's not the right attitude. It's lust or love. And then you have wrath or righteous anger.
Right.
So that you're angry about the right things, but that you are not letting that anger dictate your actions, but you're handing that over to God because vengeance belongs to Him.
Right. And I mean, anger just is, even it might have been provoked, but it just gets out of hand so quickly. And I think it's just a warning. There are things that anger is the right response toward, but again, tempered, and vengeance is mine.
And I mean, what I found is that it tends to narrow our focus. Like we're not able to get the lay of the land as best as we could when we're not angry. We just become, our field of vision becomes so much more small, and just trying to take a step back and say, okay, let's view the whole landscape. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, or maybe I'm reading things wrong, or maybe I'm reading it right, but I still need to focus on the right things and not get caught up in just this one thing.
Right. Well, the boxer that gets angry loses to the boxer that stays calm. I mean, typically, I just finished this fascinating biography of Kit Carson. It was so good. And so I didn't know anything. He's a remarkable figure, but he lived because he was a mountain man and a trapper and all this different stuff. And he lived, in the
like
American
a 10-year-old
West.
kid who went across the West.
Yeah. But he does live according to this spirit of vengeance that is part of Native American culture. There's no tempering of it, right? Somebody wrongs you, honor requires you to come back with great violence. But he also was a man who was able to stay calm. It's a remarkable thing, and it's that desire. Anyway, I don't know why. It's in my mind because I just finished it recently, and it's called Blood and Thunder. Very good read. It's a really sad sad point in American history for sure. And a lot of terrible things happen. And Kit Carson is almost like Alexander the Great. He seems to be just like imbued with this supernatural ability and foresight in the right moment. So he's kind of an interesting, tragic character. But the whole thing's ugly. And anyway, vengeance is mine. There's a right place for anger, but it just goes awry so fast. And I mean, I think the fact that this is it's very much a pagan way of looking at the world. So Kit Carson is a European. I mean, he's an American born in Missouri, but he's of European ancestry, and he's been tempered by Christianity, but when he gets out there, he gets caught up in it.
Yeah.
So
back to the actual text. I had a couple of questions. No. These are good asides. But 3 times it said this was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Once, out of Egypt I have called my son. Once, the Jeremiah, a voice was heard in Ramah. And then that he would be called a Nazarene. But we're not told what prophet that is. So why the threefold in this short amount of time? Why the threefold reference to this happened to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet? And what does each one of those indicate?
Well, I think, first of all, I think this is very Matthew, right? And he wants to set up the story as, this isn't really a biography of Jesus, right? This is a theological story or history of salvation. But he wants to show how, at the beginning particularly, how this is the culmination of what has come before. And, he's the sort of most, writing to Jews kind of thing. So the first one, out of Egypt I've called my son, I think is establishing just that this is the pattern and that Jesus is the true Israel. So he has to come out of Egypt and he has to endure those kinds of sorrows. The second one is that this is what happens when you live amongst pagans. And, you have this problem of you have to destroy the Philistines and or the Amorites or whoever these people are, right? You have to deal with this. But then if you go on in Jeremiah, I think it's important there in verse 30, in chapter 31, that, they are wrong to refuse comfort because God is comforting them. And in fact, he has removed their children from them for a time, but he promises to restore them to the mothers. And I think that unspoken part of Jeremiah, Matthew is expecting you to hear. And, the mothers of Bethlehem should be comforted by the promises, like the Steckhart thing, that God's hand is actually guiding this and that God is controlling this, even the worst sort of things and the most awful tragedies. Mm-hmm. And then the third one, I think, is actually the real heart of the Christological stuff. And I got this from Gibbs years ago. It's in his text notes. So there's the 2 common ways of reading this. The 2 most common are either that it's a word play on the Nazarite vows from Numbers. Is that Numbers 6? That's not Numbers 6. Maybe it is Numbers. Anyway, somewhere in the Bible. The Nazarites, like Samson, right? Yeah. And so the word Nazarene sounds like Nazarite, even in English. And so it's to say Jesus is going to be like Samson, or Jesus is, separated in that way and is going to do these things. Or a little more common, I think, is it's a word play on the Hebrew word for branch, which is Isaiah 11, that a branch will come out of the roots, right? So after the stump is cut down from the stump of Jesse, the Messiah is going to come. It's this branch. And again, it's a word play. It's not the same word. But so those are the 2 common possibilities. Edersheim takes the branch idea. That's what he likes. But Gibbs notices that this is actually, which was spoken by the prophets, plural. The other two are singular, the prophet. And so there isn't a specific Bible passage that seems to be being cited, but it seems to be the general message of the prophets, like the totality of what the prophets are saying about the Messiah. And so he ties it to particularly like to Isaiah 52 and 53, the suffering servant. That is, to be a Nazarene means that he's going to be despised. He's going to be seen as he's from the wrong place. He's the wrong kind of person. And you certainly have that with, in the call of Nathanael, right? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Right? That's the way Nazareth is viewed. And at the trial, or before the trial of Jesus at Caiaphas, when he's being tried in Caiaphas's court, and they're asking Peter, right? It's derision. You got a Galilean accent. You talk like a hillbilly. And you must be with him because he's a hillbilly like you, right? And isn't he from Nazareth? And then on the cross, of course, it's Jesus of Nazareth.
Nazareth, yeah.
King of the Jews. So you have this kind of the point of I think Gibbs makes a great point. I think he's right. I think he's completely right. I think it's I mean, who knows, but it's not that makes it not a wordplay, but rather that Jesus just can't come from Beverly Hills, or what, I don't know what the fancy place is. He's got to come from the slums. He's got to come, and it can't be the slums of New York City. It's got to be a slum in Alabama, or whatever, I don't know, whatever the place is that, like Americans look down upon, but I don't know, Mississippi, Alabama.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe Indiana. I don't
what your area code is.
Right.
I mean,
so
that was the big thing in Chicago. I grew up in the suburbs and we had, an 815 area code, which included everything pretty much outside of Chicago at the time. And Chicago was 630. And then you had some other ones up, in the western suburbs as they grew. But, if you had an 815 area code, they're like, oh, you're not really in the city. You're a hillbilly. You're a hick.
Flyover country or whatever
So I like Gibbs' point. I think that makes a whole lot more sense to me actually than the play on the words.
Yeah, me too. And I think it just really does seem, and then especially the fact that it comes back up, it does become the identifying mark. He's of Nazareth
or from Galilee
right. He's not really pure. And
well, you do get that sense throughout Matthew, don't you? That there is a, like the movers and the shakers are in Jerusalem. They're in the big city.
Right.
They're in Judea. And everyone else is just kind of worthless.
It's so funny too, how it's always kind of just a matter of, local perspective, right? Because I mean, it's not like anybody in Rome is impressed by Jerusalem.
No.
Right. So like Jerusalem seems like such a big, cool place, if you're in Judah, but I mean, it's such a small view of the world, but we're all guilty of that. And, it just shows again that we just love the wrong things.
Yeah.
And we judge by the wrong standards. And so there you go. Yeah. I think it is a great point. It really kind of solves the Missouri
Synod. In the Missouri Synod pastorate, at least when I was going to seminary, it was, are you a Fort Wayne grad or a St. Louis grad? Right. you were the black sheep if you went to Fort Wayne, but you were the really good kind of pastor if you came from St. Louis. I think some of that distinction is kind of going away a little bit, but at least in my time, that was as soon as they asked you that question, you kind of knew like, oh, they had already pegged you. They had put you in a camp.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it definitely works the other way too, I mean,
yeah, well, I'm sure the people in Galilee said, those highfalutin Jerusalemites.
Yeah, they're a bunch of jerks. They're not real Christians like us. Yeah, no, of course. But I mean, I think what's so great about the St. Louis Fort Wayne rivalry is that we think either one of these places is significant. I mean, you know, it's not like you're going to walk into the University of Chicago and they're going to be like, "Oh, you went to Fort Wayne or St. Louis?" I mean, how big are those seminaries? Oh, we graduated when we were big, we graduated 100, and they're like, I mean, these are just not significant places to the world. And, the fact that we're comparing them is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's just this, right. They're not, no Roman thinks that the Judah province is a peach. That's not where they want to be. Yeah. Pilate doesn't want to be in Judah. He wants to be in, I don't know, Egypt. They like Egypt a lot. Greece, even by this time, they even like Gaul and Italy, but Judah's a backwater nothing place.
So what do we focus on here? Given the liturgical context, either as Christmas 2 or the Vigil of Epiphany, like what do you have to discuss, I guess?
I'm going after this king thing. I think the kings, being used by God to fulfill the salvation of the world and then dying. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to focus on I'm going to do the vigil. So it's not going to start till 19, but I've already had Holy Innocents and I've got Epiphany coming. It's all kind of backwards chronologically, but I think I want to establish how God works through these kings to get the Messiah where he needs to be for the salvation of the world. And then on Epiphany, I can focus on, the goodness of the Gentiles coming and, God's mercy to them. Okay. So that's that's what I'm looking. I'm pretty impressed by that king thing.
Yeah.
And then Psalm 2, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like to do a bit on Psalm 2 for Christmas Eve, because I'm pretty sure that's the psalm for Christmas. That's part of the psalm from Christmas Eve, isn't it?
I can't remember.
Or maybe it's Christmas Day. I can't remember.
When all was still and it was midnight. That's from the Apocrypha, but that's the antiphon. Mm-hmm. The word leaped down. Yeah, I can't remember. I don't know what it is for this, but
and that's,
I don't know.
In the context, that's also like he leapt down and brought the plagues, right?
Right. Yes, it is. Yeah. But we don't read
so
that
it makes
part.
sense it makes sense if it was Psalm 2, why do the nations rage?
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, that's right. It might be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the, I don't know. I mean, again, but I liked, so between the Steckart and the Walther sermon, I liked the Walther one better. And I liked the theme, the Walther thing about don't be afraid. So I like the idea too of this being kind of a New Year's sermon, that we're going to enter into this new year. And with this, you could kind of blend the two, like Steckart. We know it's going to be bad, but don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Right. Don't. Yeah. It's going to be bad. So you already know that. Just kind of embrace it and recognize that God is with you. He knows what he's doing. Here's what he did to Jesus. Here's what he did to Mary, and look at how it worked out. And here are the promises and what he says he'll do for you. And so don't renounce Christianity out of fear. That's a pretty good theme.
That is. Well, I like how Steckart begins, and he has that whole thing about when we baptize infants, and then when we confirm them, and then when we marry them. Oh, yeah. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. So it's funny. Yeah, go ahead.
He says, "Our infants who are baptized in Jesus' name are already marked with the cross of Jesus. When baptized children are confirmed, disgrace, scorn, ridicule, trial, and temptation are held before them as possibilities in the event they remain faithful to their baptismal vow and to their Lord Jesus Christ. Engaged couples are given God's blessing at the altar, at the consecration of their marriage, along with the promise of the future marital cross. And in the name of Jesus, we pastors predict for the congregation, for all individual Christians, new sufferings and temptations during the ensuing year. For from the word of God, it is certain Christianity and suffering are inseparable. And I just like the reminder of, so often we begin to think that what Jesus said, that, the way is difficult and the door narrow, right? Is the way to everlasting life. We forget that, and we think it should be easy and wide.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and we're trying to figure out how to make it easier all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing I didn't, so I always want to say, well, okay, so new temptations are going to come, but they're going to be the same as the old ones. I mean, I think there's a certain sense in which we can pretty well predict, where our weaknesses are and what we're going to struggle with. And I think that's part of, so I sort of didn't like that because of that particular line, because I think there's this idea, this vanity that I'm going to overcome this. Now I'm good at this, It's like the dieting thing. I'm gonna eat nothing but cantaloupe for 6 weeks and lose all this weight, and then, or whatever it is, or if you're Larry Bean, meat. I'm gonna eat meat, nothing but meat, but the problem is you actually got to live like that the rest of your life, and it's, I don't know, it's we want it to be like fixed and then go back to being easy again.
Oh yeah. We want. We don't want to play whack-a-mole, and we don't want we don't want the set it and forget it.
That's a great illustration.
By Ronco. We want the Christian life to be like Ronco. The you can put something in and set it and forget it, and everything just runs automatically on it. And it comes out perfect every time. We want Instapot Christian life.
There you go. I was going to say crock pot. Yeah, it's the same idea, right? And the truth, I like that. It's much more like whack-a-mole. Yeah. That's a good illustration for the ministry also. The ministry feels a lot more like whack-a-mole than an Instapot.
Yeah. Well, I
think you're right.
All of life is like that.
All of that. Well, that's why the ministry is like that. That's right.
Marriage and raising your kids, like if it's this is the telltale sign. They're like, if it's not one thing, it's another, and that's
right. That's right.
Yeah. So
I was listening to this. I can't remember his first name. Is this Admiral McCraven? He was the commander of the Joint and SEAL and all that stuff. So he wrote another book on leadership. It's pretty good. I was listening to it, and he shocked me. And at the end of it, he talked about the goodness of inspections. And man, did I hate inspections, and could never see the sense of them. And he was like, all good soldiers love inspections. I'm like, what? I was a good soldier. I hated them. But he was right. Not that I loved him. He was wrong about that. But I was wrong about thinking I was a good soldier. But he pointed out that you have to, right? It requires due diligence, and the commander has to make sure that the troops are ready, and it's tedious, and the troops don't like it, but they do appreciate that you're paying attention, and it does help them actually have this high standard. So it was just one of those funny moments where I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe inspections actually have purpose and are good. And here I was, this, idiot barracks lawyer just grousing about the stupidity of inspections. But what I didn't like about it was, it's just what you're saying.
Year.
It's that.
Yeah, that's the new year. This is what we do.
You got to pay attention. Yep.
And they're regular, but not always at the same hour or the same time, I assume, because you always have to be ready.
Right. A lot of them are, they're coming, but the point is that, the details matter, and you can't ever get lazy on them. And as soon as you slacken up, you're going to forget a piece of equipment, or you're going to, and it's just, I mean, this is, again, it's like you said, it's like, it's everything. That's why it feels like whack-a-mole, because it's never done. You're never done. You have to, I mean, if your life's on the line and the life of your comrades on the line and the mission's actually important, then we got to pay attention to this stuff.
Yeah.
So the goodness of inspections, I never could have predicted that. If you had asked me just a second before I listened to this, I probably would have told you how much I hated inspections and how stupid they were. I just couldn't see and then I'm just like, he explains this and I'm like, I'm such again, I thought I knew stuff I didn't. And I benefited from kind of tradition and the wisdom of these things without even realizing it. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, this is why what football teams run tape, even high school teams.
Yeah,
it's a form of inspection. I always tell my acolytes that I'm going to start recording the service just so that I can run tape on them. And they're all football players, so they're like, oh. I haven't ever done it.
We do that here, actually. We actually do that.
You run tape on the acolytes?
Well, we record the services and we do use it to show the acolytes.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in after action reviews, which I learned in the military. I love after action reviews. We always have, because you have to somehow record the lesson. You have to learn lessons and not just, okay, it's over, forget what happened. Even if it went almost perfectly, what could we do better? But it never goes. I mean, there's always things to learn. And then you have to record those and you have to talk about it, because otherwise you're going to forget. And so we do that with the acolytes. And we often in fact do use, I mean, we try to do it immediately after the service so they can't, before it's forgotten. But yeah. And I mean, it's really handy having recordings of things like, the Easter Vigil or these once a year services to go, oh yeah, how did we do this? So I mean, I think, I probably bug people with it, but I think it does pay off. Yeah, because they want the acolytes to actually be of service to the congregation in leading the worship. And so, they need to do it well.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts?
Oh, this is a good, I liked this book. It was called The Wisdom of the Bullfrog by William McRaven. It's worth getting it as an audiobook. It's easy listen. It's not really something you got to read deeply. So there's my final thought.
All right. Thanks. Well, we'll pick up next time with Epiphany 1. Take care, Dave.
Great. Thanks, Jason.